We've talked about entering the flow and trying to get past the void, escaping the meaning crisis. The next thing that is really important is what happens next? Because say you actually have an experience, you start feeling things, you start waking up and getting energized. Maybe you start connecting with a faith that you thought meant nothing to you and now really, really does. Well, what do you do when you start actually waking up? Let's talk about spiritual awakenings today as we walk down creation's paths. Hello, everybody. My name is Charlie. I am a non-binary Christopagan Druid who practices creation spirituality. And I am joined by another Christopagan Druid who also practices creation spirituality, a wonderful husband, Martin. Hello. Today we're going to be talking about spiritual awakenings. One, I think people make way too big a deal out of spiritual awakenings. And also, simultaneously, don't make enough of a big deal out of spiritual awakenings. Because they are magical, amazing things. Sometimes it's an epiphany. All of a sudden you just have a moment of sudden realization. Sometimes it's a deeper mystical experience. Sometimes you've been practicing something for a long time and it happens. Sometimes it goads you into following a path that you might not have even considered before. Sometimes you have more than one and you're like, oh, okay, how do I incorporate all of this new energy into my life?
Sometimes many more than one awakening, which is why I like that it uses the imagery of a spiritual awakening, because just like waking up every day, some people, you have them daily because they go right back to sleep afterwards.
Yeah, I've known a couple people like that, and
Where,
they're
yeah,
interesting.
interesting. It happens. So it's not even just one necessarily.
So, in basic, what is a spiritual awakening? A spiritual awakening, in brief, is that moment, if we were to use the metaphors, that the scales fall off of your eyes. You feel, sense, see, notice a connection to something greater than you. Some people have these in nature, where they come over a hill while walking and suddenly see this grand valley stretched out before them and just suddenly have this moment of this interconnectedness with all life in the universe from time immemorial, just completely connected to everything.
Many astronomers have them just when they look through the telescope into the greater cosmos,
There is
the
an
universe out there. It's amazing. Yeah, there's a large number of astronomers out there that had spiritual awakenings from simply that. Because
cosmology is a weird anomaly
yeah,
in the sciences. More people that study space have some type of spiritual belief than people who do not. And I think that's because you can't look at the vastness of the cosmos without something stirring inside of you. I know when I was a child, we lived out in the country. We didn't have any street lights around us. I remember when Dad would let me get up on the hood of the car, or sometimes if his truck was parked just right, lay down in the back of his truck and just stare up at all of those stars. It was magical. I learned the names of all the constellations. It really was something that meant a lot to me. I also remember being at church and feeling that call for the first time, that pull that I wanted to go to the altar and that I wanted to have, as my pastor at the time said, a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I remember when I had my first dreams of Bridget and how terrified I was. Because not all spiritual awakenings leave us with a positive feeling. Some of us leave us with awe. And it's important to remember we had to create two words to deal with the word awe. We don't often connect them anymore, but we created awful, something that is full of awe, and awesome, something that has a little bit of nice bit of awe, but not too much, because too much awe is terrifying, and awful, and so there's just a little bit is awesome. Both words come from the same source. They come from the word awe. Sometimes we just experience the sublime feeling of just the utter beauty of the world. I can't tell you what your spiritual awakening will be, and I could list a whole bunch of things but one of the things that I know that is universal to those of us who have had one is this kind of simultaneous fear of having it again, wanting it to have it again and to never have that feeling we got from it to ever subside. Let me introduce you to spiritual practice. That's really what spiritual practice is all about. Is about maintaining that sense of awe and wonder, that sense of interconnectedness and interbeing that we have and that we get in those moments of awakening, those few moments where we feel like we can see everything as it is, those grand moments of epiphany, or sometimes very subtle moments of epiphany. I know I've had awakenings that have happened ironically in my dreams. My first encounters with Bridget and what allured me to her was actually a series of dreams. I wrote about this, and you can read it over on wisdomscry.com. It's in an article called My Spiritual Experience in the Bridget section. But I started having dreams of just fire. That was it. These dreams, they felt like they lasted forever, of just fire, just burning flame. And eventually I started having dreams of her, and eventually we talked. But this was over about a month or so. They were every night, the same dream. And since that was an encounter with a spirit, and a lot of our encounters are with spirits, the next thing was for me to figure out, do I want this relationship?
Yeah.
Because remember, you can always say no. Personal sovereignty is a very important thing, especially in Druidry.
Yes.
You can always say no. But if so, am I willing to put in the effort to maintain this relationship? Because the first thing that was asked of me was to start learning the Irish language. I was not feeling well at the time. I was taking classes again. I was doing a lot of other work. I want to fit in language study in the middle of this somehow. Well, long story short, I ended up developing that relationship. It might not be so obvious for you in how to develop that relationship. Prayer is always a great way to do it. And remember, we have been tormented by this imperial idea of prayer. Prayer is not giving a laundry list to the heavens. Like, dear spirits, here is your to-do list for today. You are not the managerial officer in charge here. Though I feel like that's usually what prayer is turned into. Prayer is devotion. Prayer is just talking. But, and this is very important, prayer is listening. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of people, when they hear listening, are like, oh, so you're going to start hearing voices. No. In fact, most of the time when I'm talking to Bridget, when I say Bridget told me something, I'm either deep in a visualization meditation or in prayer or asleep. These are things that come in dreams. It is not common and not something to really be afraid of that you're going to start suddenly hearing voices.
The analogy I like to use is it's like when you're out in a public space, there's a bunch of people talking all around you, and you hear voices, but you're not, unless you're actually listening, you're not hearing what they're actually saying. I let people know, I'm like, it's like that in all of life. Even when interacting with spirits, there's all this talking and cacophony going on. If you're not listening, you won't hear. But you have to act. It's about learning that active listening and develop that active listening skill.
And the way most people
And
hear is actually through intuition.
yeah,
It's not so much a booming voice or even a small voice entering your head. A lot of times it's just you feel your attention being drawn to something.
well, that's the second thing. Once you've heard, it's how your body translates that
Yeah.
into understanding that you could possibly grasp. And I have to phrase it so vaguely because it is just that. There's a lot of translation complications that come in. A lot of that has to do with the personhood that's doing the listening.
Yeah.
Just like you may have studied another foreign language or second language, so you may know some words, you may recognize some words right away and be like, oh yeah, this means this. But as you're learning that second language, you also learn like that word doesn't always mean that. Sometimes there's slang uses. It's all also how it's translated. And honestly, even like, especially for myself, because I'm amused playing around with this, even as a English speaker, when sometimes I hear English words and my brain trying to interpret the sounds it's hearing tells me it's something different from what's actually being said. And it's usually often when it's like in the other room and other background noises. And sometimes it's really amusing what comes back because, oh, I know I didn't hear correctly. There's no way they actually said those words. And that's when usually the person just goes, huh? What'd you say? And then you repeat it. And it's the same kind of thing. There's that translation, and a lot of times it just comes up as intuition.
And sometimes it's omens in a way. I don't really like that term because Omens is very specific, but I've noticed the meaning of this word being used for this, where when I first started working with the Morgan many, many, many years ago, crows just spontaneously would show up
Yeah.
wherever I was.
Yeah.
There would be crows there, and they would not only be there, but they would like land in front of me and walk up to me and start making noises.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't speak crow. I'm sorry. I wish I spoke crow so I would clearly know what this crow is trying to say right in front of me. But it's an odd thing to have happen. I would look around and I like wasn't near a nest where it's just like get away or anything like that. Again, if it was trying to ward me off, you'd think it'd be swooping at me or something, like landing and walking over to me and just making talking noises.
Yeah, like a conversation, like casual. It was just hanging out.
This just kept happening. It kept happening. It was like, no matter where I was. For a while there, when we first moved into this house, the crows would come out. And when I would go into town, we would watch them leave the trees and they would fly with us into town. And we'd do our stuff in town and we'd watch them fly back with us. Like the crows were always with us. And this is weird, right? Like when I'm saying you're looking for these omens, right? They're things that are out of the ordinary. Why is a crow following you? Why is this happening? And then you start feeling it out and really trying to develop an understanding of, well, maybe this is the Morgan. Maybe this is her trying to get my attention. And trust me, wasn't my first thought. Had a friend at the time who was really into Norse paganism. And our first thought was that this was Odin, because he had been talking to me a lot about Odin lately. And Odin has ravens, not crows, but we don't really have ravens around here. So closest corvid in the area. And it was always one or two crows. It was never more than two crows. So he was very much of the idea that it was Odin, and I kind of tested that and felt nothing. No connection, no nothing. It's that wonderful passage of scripture. Test everything and hold on to what is true. So I tested and nothing happened. When I thought, well, maybe this is the Morgan again, because I had had an encounter with her many, many years before that, because I am in fact old. And there was this immediate connection. Like, oh, yeah, this is that. What is this? And a discernment process begins. It's rarely, if ever, as clear as you get in the movies of a voice just saying, Brian, do this. Charlie, do that.
Yeah.
I wish it were that simple. And sometimes, like I said, in meditation or in a dream, you will be interacting with these energies and you will be conversing with them in that state, in that altered state of consciousness, and words will be said. But then there's still the discernment process of, well, was that my own mind? Was that a dream? Is that something that is actually possible to do? Is that something I should be doing, want to do? All of those discernment questions pop back up again, but rarely is it ever that simple.
That goes to one of the greater challenges that comes up with spiritual awakenings and caution for the beginners and those beyond beginners is that along with discernment is that translation, interpretation.
Yeah.
Even in the Bible, they talk about along with the gift of prophecy, there's those gifted with the ability to interpret said prophecy. And there's this whole caution and warning and importance put on interpreters being there to help with that, because the discerning, the interpretation is critical, and it's also really, really tricky. Because even in dreams where you think it might be real clear, you can sit down and have a clear conversation, it's not. It's so rarely is. Most of the time, it is not.
Yeah.
It's still allegorical.
It's still your imagination.
It's still your imagination because your brain has to
interpreting.
translate. So your person is adding all this stuff in just in an attempt to interpret the pure message, I guess you could say. You know, I guess to put it in terms of like audio for the people really into audio and records and stuff. You're given the lossless file, but you yourself can't process that much data. So it's all compressed. You're getting the compressed file. You've lost a bunch of bits. It's just part of the process. And recognizing that is important.
The first rule, I would say, that is virtually universal. I would say actually is universal here, is if you are having a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience where you are feeling that it is telling you that you are the center of the universe, the indispensable person, the only one in the cosmos that can, blah, 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 blah. That is your own ego. The task may still be something that you're supposed to do. But Moses didn't accomplish his work alone. If it wasn't for Aaron and Miriam, the Exodus would never happen. It took a village to raise the apostles, because not only did you have Jesus teaching them, but you had Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Susanna and Mary of Bethany and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary, the mother of John Mark. And there was a lot of Marys in this group. There was a whole village of people there making sure that this could happen. It's not a singular task. I can't think of any singular task any of us would be called to. So be very wary when you're feeling that your spiritual awakening or any spiritual experience is trying to make you the center of the universe. Or, even worse, telling you that another living, breathing human being is the center of the universe. That's infatuation, because they're not either. There's a wonderful Renaissance manuscript that defines God as a circle whose center is nowhere and whose edge is everywhere. And I love this image for two reasons. I think it's very powerful and it resonates with me. But also, it reminds you that you are somewhere. So you're always on the edge. You can't be in the center. You are not the moral of the story. You're not the main character in this story. In fact, that there is a main character to the story. Maybe it's the universe. I don't know. But none of us are the main character of the story. So be very mindful of your own ego or your own infatuations when they are trying to get you to center on an individual person or on yourself, because those are usually delusions that need to be swept out of the way. And we're going to be talking about the other good thing to keep in mind in a lot more detail later when we talk about the three Dharma keys. But realizing that the three Dharma keys are important, the three truths of reality, whatever you want to call them, are important. And they will guide you to all wisdom. Now, if you're not familiar with this idea, it comes from Buddhism, and that is that all conditioned things are impermanent. All conditioned existence, everything in conditioned existence is impermanent. So that's anything that has a cause and effect, a before and an after, a this and a that. Anything that exists in relationship to anything else is impermanent and liable to change. It does not last or stay the same forever. The second is that there is no self. Everything is an interconnected web. And even you on the inside, like your body is not you. Because if it wasn't for all of the microorganisms living on your skin, keeping disease from creeping in, and helping to actually keep your skin supple and smooth and taken care of, all of the microbiome in your guts that are actually helping you eat, there are a lot of vitamins and minerals and nutrients that you are incapable of digesting. They digest it for you and then hand it off. You just as a body are not an independent being. And we're all interconnected, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, part of this great interbeing. That's key number 2. And key number 3 is that liberation is possible. That it is possible to find a cessation of suffering, of aversion, of attachment. That there is a way out. When we are having any kind of spiritual experience, these 3 keys really help us to put everything into perspective. Because again, when it tries to tell you that you're the main character of the universe, well, I have no self. So I can't be the main character of the universe. So that illusion dissolves. If you do this, you will forever be, well, all things are impermanent, so that can't be right. Nothing but darkness lies in our future and nothing good will ever happen to... Well, no, liberation is possible. And all things are impermanent. So no. And we can break through a lot of these delusions and issues that arise when trying to interpret through using just these 3 keys. We actually have an episode scheduled where we're going to dig into them much deeper in just a little bit. They really do help a lot, especially in these moments where everything is so heightened and you are feeling this interconnectedness with all things, especially as somebody who in the West was raised with a big ego. You start feeling very important. They really do help to weed out a lot of that falsehood and delusion so that you can actually get to what is actually happening here and what is being said. They're nice ways to sweep away some of those additions that we add. So as you are contemplating your awakening or longing for it, and I have to say, If you're here going, oh, I wish I could have a spiritual awakening, I would tell you you've already had one.
I was going to be self-promotional for a moment and go over to the Hollowstead. It's called the Light Body Meditation. Do the guided meditation and keep doing it over and over again, and you'll have your spiritual awakening eventually. Or you'll just recognizing that you've had it and that you keep having it in a lot of cases. Because I've had people come to me and they're like, well, I've never had a spiritual awakening. And then I'll get them going into conversation, and then they'll start talking about this time. They'll be like, well, there was this one time, and they'll go into it. And then in recounting the story, they'll realize, oh, wait, I had that connectedness. It's that connectedness. That's what it is.
Often
And
when we were children,
yes, most people have, at least when they were children, had multiple awakenings. I think some people permanence thinking where they think, I've had the awakening, now I'm awake.
no,
And it's just like wakefulness throughout the day. You're awake for a period of time, but you will fall back to sleep. And sometimes you can be awake and not be alert. And sometimes you can be running in beta waves and be awake doing things and not even be awake. You're just doing things.
very true. Just to add to that, if you're here wishing you had one,
Yeah.
when I say you've already had one, I don't think you have that yearning without it. Because if you actually
Yeah.
tease that yearning apart, you're longing for a nostalgia for something you can't quite remember or that you've lost touch with. That if you have that yearning, oh man, I wish I could have a true spiritual awakening somewhere in your past, even if it was a small one, you already had, and that's what gave you this desire to continue to have it. And we need to be careful because Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche wrote a wonderful book called Spiritual Materialism. And one of the things that he warns us about is chasing these feelings. It's not about the feelings. The feelings are great. Don't get me wrong. The feelings are great. They're wonderful. And don't feel bad if you've had one. That's not what I'm talking about here. But there is this gotta catch them all aspect that some people fall into with spirituality, where I've had this experience and it's starting to fade. Ooh, shiny. There's something else over here. Ooh, it's starting to give me that feeling like I'm about to have another spiritual experience. Let me try it over there and see if I can have it again. And we kind of go from one thing to another, to another, to another, just seeking out that feeling and never letting ourselves root in and really connect with anything. That's different from not knowing where your home is and trying to find a place to be. In my life, I tried a little bit of everything. I tested Buddhism and Judaism and Baha'ism, Islam. I tried a little bit of everything. And it took me a while to realize where I actually belonged, where my heart was. And I didn't really find that until I read Prayer by Matthew Fox. That was the book that was like, home. That was the first book, lit me up and said, home. Second book was Minion by Rabbi Rami Shapiro. And then a whole bibliography after that I'm not going to go into right now. But those are the first two that really gave me a sense of home. And so we basically practiced creation spirituality with Minion as our religion for many, many years. And as we discovered new practices and new understandings, grew into what we have today and what we offer today. But those were our seeds. So it's not wrong to test and try to find out what soil you want to grow in. But it is important to be mindful that we're not just chasing that experience of, oh, this is new, that new spirituality smell. Because that can be addictive and really isn't going to help us get that depth that we're actually longing for. I hope this has helped y'all out. This is a very complex topic, and we may discuss it again. If you have any questions, if you're listening to us on YouTube or Spotify, you can leave us a comment down in the comments. And thank you to everybody who's been leaving comments down there. I can't tell you how much it brightens my day when I get up in the morning and I see all of these wonderful comments and get to go in there and respond. So thank you to everybody who's doing that. If you're not listening to us on Spotify or YouTube, head over to creationistpaths.com and click on the chat, and you can leave us your comments and questions there. Because we really want to help you and make sure that we are answering the questions that you actually have about the spiritual path. If you haven't already liked, subscribed, or left a review, depending on what you can do on the app you're listening to us on, please do that. That really helps us out a lot. It helps us to continue growing. Also, if you know anybody that you think could use this message, please share on your social media, send it in the link to your friends. I don't want to scare anybody, but I get to see our reports in the YouTube analytics. I can see that somebody's sharing us on Discord, on a Discord somewhere, and thank you for that. That really does help us out a lot to get the word out about what we're doing. And if you have a couple bucks you can throw away, you can head either over to creationspaths.com and join there. We're going to be putting out some classes over there, and the people who have our members will be getting those classes early. You can also go over to Patreon and Ko-fi, where I am CE Dorset on both, CEDORSETT, and that helps to support everything I do, including my music, my writing, everything. And as I like to remind y'all, this is not asking for a donation to the Lord. This is a wonderful blessing that you all are giving us so that we can help keep food on the table, the power on, and a roof over our heads. So thank you to everybody who does that. So as we head out today, may the blessings of the one life ever be with you, opening your eyes so that you may see the glories that surround you hour by hour and day by day. Amen.
Amen.